Welcome, ladies and gents, my name is Curci, and I have been playing a lot of Dying Light. For whatever reason, there has been a lot about that game that honestly surprised me. Before I get into this video talking about in the many ways that Dying Light actually surprised me, I just want to first say why it surprised me. Firstly, it's the developer Techland. Techland is the developers behind the Dead Island games, and that's a game that I'm not really all that into. So they're creating another zombie game that's under the first-person perspective, and then there's some free-running elements. Even after the gameplay that we see at E3 and later gameplay demos down the road, the game, it looked good, it just didn't hook me. On top of that, there was the whole thing of like, you can play as a zombie, but only if you pre-order the game, and then that kind of irritated me, but we'll get into that. And then after all that information, building up to the game's release, aside from the TV spots, the game went just radio silent for a long time. And then I essentially forgot about the game. It was only until Gamefly reminded me, hey, by the way, we have shipped this game to you. And I'm like, oh, I forgot that this game was even a thing. So imagine all of that, not really caring about it initially, getting irritated at the marketing decisions that they're making, and then of course forgetting about the game, ultimately getting the game and thoroughly enjoying it. We're going to start off with the one area that I feel the game really had no business being actually good in, and that's the actual game's story. You look at Dying Light and you're saying to yourself, this is all about the gameplay, it's all about the free running, it's all about killing zombies, that's just what the game is. And in that area, the game is actually really fun. But tack on the story and the really good characters, or I felt that they were good characters. The story made me care about them, and then there were some really hard-hitting emotional moments. It's just, those moments happen, and then you're like, wow, this is deep, this is intense. And it just invests you so much more with the characters, invests you so much more with the overall story. Is this game gonna win awards for its story? No. Those big, hard-hitting emotional moments just help sell the characters even better, help sell the story even better. When that really started to kick in, I started playing the game and being like, yep, I'm gonna keep doing the next story mission so I can figure out what happens next. When the game hooked me, it hooked me, and it wasn't just with the story. The game really hooked me with its gameplay. Like I said before, when you look at this game, you look at, okay, it's about the free running, it's about the gameplay, it's about the killing zombies, and in that respect, yes it is. See, when you're playing on the controller, you instantly think to yourself, well, the ability to jump is A. What? Not in this game. In this game, it defaults it to the shoulder button, and then I went into like the controls and I really couldn't figure out how to get it to remap to the A button, so I had to deal with it, and it was a little clunky at first. You have to like look at the ledges that you want to jump to and climb up on, and it just didn't feel natural for me because I was doing the bumper jumper, the game was forcing me to do it. It wasn't hard, it was just something I wasn't really used to. So imagine that really not allowing me to get into the game. Like I really was having a lot of trouble picking the game up. I would play the game for an hour, let it go for a couple of days, pick up the game, play it again for an hour, let it go for a couple of days. But when that free running gameplay actually clicked, when I finally started flying across the rooftops, the game became immensely fun. As I started doing things and fighting in the combat, crafting these awesome weapons, I started really seeing where this game started to shine. And then you start to see other things where the game starts to shine, and then other things where the game starts to shine. And then it just, when the game hooked me with the gameplay, it started hooking me with the story, it started hooking me with the questing and the extra things. I almost have to nitpick when I start talking about negatives. So what is the game's story, since we touched on the story a little bit? Well, you play as a guy named Kyle Crane. Kyle Crane is hired by the GRE, the Global Relief Effort. They're tasking him with going into the city of Haran and actually trying to find this lost file of the rogue agent that they've had down there. But the city of Haran is quarantined because there's a zombie breakout. I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but you go in there, you meet up with some survivors, and then the story continues. You're working undercover, so the people that you meet, you don't want to let them know that you're working for the GRE, that you're trying to find this file. No, you're trying to make good with them, you're trying to help them out. Maybe that ends up being like you're being the errand boy for the first couple of missions. I feel like you were the errand boy for a little bit longer than you needed to. Like you meet up with these groups, they have you go run out there, grab some supplies, maybe help out some people, and then you go to another group and they go have you run out and get some supplies and stuff like that. It's annoying at first, but then the game really starts to move, and when it, like I said, just with the gameplay, when that hooked, the story hooked, and then everything just started popping after that. So you go out into the world and you free run on the rooftops and you fight zombies, and fighting zombies is so awesome. Fighting a zombie is so satisfying. When you have that melee weapon, you smack him in the head and it acts like a zombie would, where it just Really brutal, really graphic, but so satisfying. You get a zombie on the ground the first couple of times and you're just smacking them dead with your hammer or whatever it is that you happen to be using at the time. You get better weapons as the game goes, but originally you're like picking up rusty wrenches or literally anything that you can get your hands on you're using as a weapon. But then in addition to the regular melee attack, you have a kicking ability. So I usually use that when I'm trying to control the situation. When you first play, you're like, oh, there's a zombie. I immediately want to go fight it. Like originally, like if you're a smart player, you're going to see a horde of zombies and be like, this way then. Like you can probably take on that horde a little bit later, but even in a little bit later when you get better weapons and things, it's probably better to avoid the big groups anyway. Because the big thing about the zombies is that they're not really a threat one-on-one, they're a threat in numbers, and when they surround you, because that's the thing you don't want. You don't want to be surrounded. That's really what the kicking ability is for, is to basically control your enemies. Get them away from you so that you can build up your stamina, because you can only swing your weapon so many times before your character has to catch his breath, and then you go back in for more swings. But you gotta be very cautious of your environment. Sometimes there are no zombies behind you, but there's a horde off in the distance and you start fighting this one you think is isolated, but then they just start becoming really curious and drawing forward, and then you turn around and then there's like 5 million of them. Sometimes you'll be fighting a zombie and then one will come in from the left and he's coming down the stairs, so you just gotta be aware of your environment when fighting against zombies. Other zombies, like let's just say the big goon guys, which these guys are really formidable, especially early on in the game, but they also are pretty hairy even later on in the game. They have this big melee weapon that they use to swing down, and if it hits you, not only will it do damage, but it'll knock you down on the ground, and it'll take a little bit before you can stand back up. And that becomes a little bit of a problem because it leaves you vulnerable. If there are any other zombies around, they're gonna smack you. Not to mention, he's probably gonna wind up for another hit. When I first encountered these guys early on, I tried to like stay away from them. So I'm just like throwing stars at him until he finally died. But then later on in the game, you start to get better weapons, and you start to realize that the jump button not only jumps, but it also dodges left, right, and backwards. So you're dodging around him, like kind of spinning around him as you're smacking him, and then he'll eventually go down. And then that became my preferred approach, because I really don't like using throwable weapons unless I necessarily have to. The enemy you really want to use ranged weapons for are the bombers. These guys will take you out in one shot if they get really close. These guys, I hate these guys. If there's ever an enemy in this game that I am truly afraid of, it's these guys. But then there are toads. They're like the spitters. There are the normal infected, the regular zombies that you would expect, the ones that really walk slow but are really dangerous as a group. There are a lot of different types of enemies in this game, and even like toward the end of the game, I was still getting introduced to new types of enemies. But the single most dangerous enemy in this game, in my opinion, would have to be the volatiles. These guys are horrifying because they only come out at night and they kind of patrol the streets. You can see on the minimap, you can see where their line of sight is and like the cone thing. The nighttime in this game, which is really where this game starts to really shift from, oh, I'm having fun, to the, okay, let's be serious now. Because you're stealthing. You don't want to attract the volatiles, because one volatile sees you, it sends out like a ping and it sends more after you. They'll climb up on buildings. They'll be right behind you. There's actually an ability where as you're running, you can hold down one button and it'll turn your character around, but you'll still keep running forward. It'll just show you what's behind you. And a lot of times you're like, all right, well, let's just look. Okay, let's keep going forward. There's a little UV light that you can use. You can shine on the volatiles and it'll kind of stun them for a little bit, so you can put some distance in between you and them. But then there's also traps out in the world. As you start to level up in the game, you start to enable the ability to use these traps. Car traps, fence traps, even light traps. And all of those can be used to navigate throughout the game, but also really at night it helps out a lot. Car alarms will be set and then they sort of set. It's not like an explosion. It's almost like a shockwave kind of thing. Light traps will just shine a UV light down, so if you attract any volatiles or anything really that comes out at night, it'll probably stop them. But what's really neat about this game is that it also encourages you to go out at night, because it gives you double XP. I really like the leveling system because it's very similar to Skyrim's leveling system. It's very much as you do, you shall become. You want to build up your agility so you can get a perk that you're building up for, go jump on some buildings. If you want to level up your power, go fight some zombies. If you want to level up your survivor tree, go scavenge, complete some quests. A lot of these perks are really cool. You can vault over zombies, you can slide and break some of their legs. There's a grappling hook that you can unlock and Spider-Man your way across the map. Not legitimately like swing, but like you can see a building and just go and pull yourself to it. The combat's really good. The night and day cycle is really good. The questing with the side quests in particular really gave me personally a very Fallout kind of vibe. Fallout is another apocalypse game. It's a nuclear apocalypse. It's not a zombie apocalypse, but it's still an apocalypse, and it has people living in this world. These are people dealing with the world the way it is now. And you're meeting with specific characters that have very specific traits where some of them have just gone insane. Like some characters will be like, all right, here's my mom, and she's just like a tin can on top of like cloth and everything. But the thing about both of those games is that not only does it have a lot of really notable characters that may be going insane, and that kind of gives it a little bit of the Fallout feel that I'm gathering, but also both worlds feel very lived in. You go into Washington, D.C. in Fallout 3, and it just feels like people up and left. And it's the same kind of thing in the city of Haran in Dying Light. You go into a home, and you're gonna see, like, okay, there's still food on the table. People were eating before they up and left because the zombie outbreak happened. The design of the world was really good. The side quests really gave the world a lot of depth, gave it a lot of life. And then there's the random events, just randomly springed up things that you can do to gather up points or just, you know, to have fun. Get rewards because there's a crafting system in this game as well. What's cool is that this game, very much like a survivory kind of game where you're looking for things so you can craft different weapons, you're looking for things so you can craft different items like med packs. But then there's also like food in the game. So like, let's just say for example, I'm out of med packs and I only have 75 out of 100 health. Like I'm not going to use a med pack so I can heal, because a med pack will heal 100 points of health. I'm not going to spend a med pack, even if I did have it, on that 25 points of health. But what I am going to do is I'm going to search fridges, I'm going to search different areas, and hopefully find a little candy bar. But then even when you don't have a med pack and you do kind of need it, you're looking for alcohol, you're looking for gauze, you're looking in these buildings where these people used to live in and just opening things up in cabinets and stuff, and you're searching for things. And it made me feel like, okay, I'm scavenging because I'm trying to survive. This is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. It just has a really strong survivor element in a zombie game, and I think it really just sold that really well. It's just a really good first-person, free-roaming zombie game that has a lot of really good survivor elements, a lot of really good story with great characters and very emotional moments. A great big open world that feels very lived in, but also has a lot of really good side quests that gives the world personality. The combat's great, the leveling system's great, the crafting system is great. It's a really rewarding and just downright fun game. But then there's also the co-op, and you know what? Every video game is always going to be more fun with friends, and this game is. But now let's kind of get into the negatives of this game because it's not perfect. There are some negative sides to it. Some of them are minor. I'm kind of nitpicking, but there are some things worth noting. I mean, it doesn't have very many. Occasionally it has a very odd glitch where sometimes a zombie will clip into an object. There was one time where I was running past this car and I can see the zombie's arms coming out of the car, but it's like, that's clearly not supposed to be there. Or one time, it was actually in the Let's Play that I released, I was fighting a zombie on top of a car and the zombie was just slowly sinking into it. I mean, it's got like really weird, odd glitches, some slow texture pop-ins, but nothing really too serious. During the story mission, I feel like the game got very hard unnecessarily. There was one time where I jumped into a sewer, I'm underwater, and all of a sudden these enemies just start shooting at me and they have dead point accuracy. Not all the time, but these enemies aren't stormtroopers. They're gonna hit you a few times. But you jump into the sewer, you hit the water, you get drilled, and then you're dead. And then you're like, what happened? Before you know it, you're doing it again, and then you get hit, and like you do that, like you die 5 times, and every time you die, you lose survivor points. And it's just like, game, relax. Let me get my mind on what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Don't kill me constantly. And then there's a competitive multiplayer where players who are playing as a very particular type of zombie, the Night Hunter is what it's called, can invade your game, and then you have to go hunt down these 5 hives in order to stop it from respawning and essentially win the game. The more you play it, the more you realize, like, okay, well, I have to hit him with the UV light, and he can get killed very quickly if I use my melee weapon, or even if I use the ranged weapon. But the first couple of times you play it, it gets really frustrating because in addition to the Night Hunter who can pounce on you and kill you instantly, you also have to worry about the other zombies, and they like to gather around the 5 hives, and it just gets frustrating after a while. And yeah, the more you play it, the more you realize the strategy going into it. But I mean, still, did it have to be that hard against one player? Like, I get maybe this game mode is set for people who are not playing by themselves, who are playing with friends, and naturally the situation gets a little bit more easier that way, but it did get frustrating, and it did weigh on me a little bit, and it made me just not want to play that mode anymore. I mean, you can enable it. You can go into your options and say, all right, I will allow people to invade my game, or you can turn that off and be like, everybody leave me alone, I'm going to do my own thing. I imagine that game mode is very fun for the person playing as the zombie, but the only people who are able to do that are people who pre-ordered the game, and that is not a smart marketing decision in my point. If you're going to give people a little bit of a perk for pre-ordering your game, don't have that perk being an entire game mode, because you're locking me off to a certain area of your game. I'm a person that really didn't expect a lot from your game, but loved it, loved everything about it, and wanted to experience everything about it, but I can't because I didn't pre-order the game. But the overall experience that I've had with Dying Light has been surprisingly extremely positive. It's the first AAA game of 2015 for me, and it is a great start. Dying Light's a great game. It's a fun game, and above anything else, if a video game is fun, there you go. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.